Her smile shines as bright as the stars at night. Her heart is as kind as can be. She has the patience of a saint, but if you push her, oh Lordy. A straight talker is smiling. She's the salt of the earth. Make no mistake, she matters. Catch Smiley's story on a live stream. Oh boy, that girl can matter. Go Smiley. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. Make no mistake why she's here. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. If you're guilty, she'll smell out your fear. Missing posters and stories of heartache and fear. She tells us all of the heartbreaking tears. She can sniff out the guilty from a mile away. If Smiley's on the case, then she's here to stay. She cares about these missing children. She cares deeply about them all. She speaks the truth with integrity. For the truth, she will seek it all. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. Make no mistake why she's here. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. If you're guilty, she'll smell out your fear. Smiley's questions are like a heat-seeking missile. She's going straight for the bullseye. Don't ever believe you can fool her. She's too wise, man, she won't comply. She values freedom like the 4th of July. She values respect even more. If you want to earn a place at Smiley's table, watch the clock, it takes time for sure. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. Make no mistake why she's here. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. If you're guilty, she'll smell out your fear. If you break her trust, you're done for. Trust don't grow back like grass. So don't give Smiley a reason to doubt you, or that friendship will shatter like glass. She's a damn good woman, that much we know. She puts in the hours to bring them kids home. If your child is missing, you want Smiley on the case. She is always willing and she gives so much grace. She's a Smiley, alright. She's a Smiley. Make no mistake why she's here. She's Smiley, alright. She's Smiley. If you're guilty, she'll smell out your fear. If you're guilty, you better feel fear.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday, everybody. It is September 25th, 2025. 25, 25, 25. That might be a lucky number for you. I don't know. I hope everybody's doing well this morning. Good morning, Dawn Emery. Hello, Lady Q. Good morning. Good morning, beautiful Janice. Hello, hello. I'm so glad y'all are in here this morning. I think we got an interesting story to talk about this morning. Dawn Emery, and let's see here. Betsy Mathis. Good morning. Good morning, Kimberly. Hello, Cyber Warrior. Hello, good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you all very, very much. And I hope y'all are doing well on this Thursday morning. This Thursday morning, we're right in fall, right? You know what? I was sitting here a while ago and I was like, dang, it's awful hot in here. Jeez, man, what is going on? So I get up to turn the air down. Somebody had the freaking heat on. I'm like, are you kidding me? I don't know if they were trying to turn it up in the middle of the night when they were sleeping and turn the heat on. Honey, it was 78 degrees in here. I'm like, we don't do that in Florida. Are you kidding me? Like, what? What? Hello? Hello? No. No. So I got my air down. So I don't know, but y'all can get y'all's coffee. I'm drinking a little lukewarm coffee because I don't know. It's just hot. Hot. It's still hot for fall. But welcome in, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Everybody. Thank you for being here. Today, I think we're going to have an interesting one. I wanted to do this one a while back ago, but so much chaos has broke out on the internet that I've been covering. And I thought this, it's sad and it's all kinds of things, but there's hope in it. There's something that could probably help somebody. And also, I just thought it was a little bit light this morning, right? But it might be a little bit of a long one, so grab your stuff. But hold on a minute. At Smiley, Mckenzie and I were friends. Are you Lady Q? You may have to come up here and tell us about that, honey. You really might. I was a little girl and watching her on One Day at a Time. But yeah, I'm so glad you're in here. Feel free to let me know anything. And if you want a link, honey, we can get a link. But yeah, a lot of people may not, because I find out a lot of people are younger than I am, and that's okay. But still, it may help somebody, and I like doing these. She's been real honest, in my opinion, all through the years with her struggles. And she's had some. She's had very, I don't know if I'm saying this right. She's had some trying, what would be called maybe embarrassing, not so much for her, but, well, not that she done, not that it was anything that was her fault, but some, I don't know how I'm trying to say it. Maybe Lady Q can put it in there for me. But I really like Mckenzie. I always have. And this, actually, you can't see it on here, but she has this book right now that I put up here. I chose with this picture that I'm showing her face, and it's called Hopeful Healing. And she has written a lot of books. Lady Q said, I wrote to her after her appearance on Oprah, and she responded, she's yeah, and she is a beautiful, I really like her. And people have struggles in life. They do. That don't make them bad people. But we're going to actually get into and this may be a long, because I got some long videos. I want to talk about it. I want to really get her out here. She's doing good things now with her life, and all that, and she's helping people, and I really want to get that out here. But this live today is about Mckenzie Phillips, her pain, her truth, and her healing. And she still struggles. She does. She don't try to hide that she still struggles. And again, one day at a time, man, it couldn't have been a more perfect role for her just to keep that name with her forever and ever and ever. One day at a time, because that's what she seems to live by. But welcome in, everybody. I'm Smiley, in case you didn't know or you're new here. You just stepped into my world where I will be blunt, raw. I will try to be as truthful as possible. And I like to get the facts out there. Sometimes we don't know all the facts, and then sometimes I will let you know if they're rumors or hearsay or what I think. But they are all our opinions, and we're allowed to have our opinions. But we're going to dive into this story, and I mean deep dive into it. And it's not easy. It's a powerful story, though. And that's what I like, these powerful stories. It's about Mckenzie Phillips. It's a woman who grew up in fame. Okay, she got famous when she was very young. Sometimes I don't think that's good for kids, but okay. And she still stands here today, but not as a headline. She stands here for a voice for survival, for healing, and for purpose. And that's all we can ask for is a purpose, right? And healing and helping people. So if you don't mind, hit that thumbs up, share this out. Let's get her story out. I think, honestly, to goodness, there can be somebody that can be helped from this. I do. That's just me. I may be wrong. Lady Q says she's a true warrior. So Lady Q knew her personally. That's awesome. That's awesome. But hear this, and I promise you, this story isn't just about Hollywood. It's about real life, okay? Hey, Cinderella. Oh, thank you. I've been wanting to cover it for about a month now, but all hell's broke up loose on the computer, as y'all know. But it's important to get back and start and cover these things. It really is. So, for those who don't know Mckenzie, she played roles in her younger days, like One Day at a Time and different things like that. But just to touch a little bit, because a lot of people will remember this, and a lot of people idolize. But see, this is why you shouldn't idolize, okay? I'm just going to touch, and just a bit, I'm going to touch on John Phillips. John Phillips was her father, and he had a band called the Mamas and the Papas. Who all in here remembers that? Because, I mean, they had good music. I like their music. I'm not going to lie about it. I like their music. And I'll still listen to it today. I don't think Mckenzie would hold that against me either. But just to give y'all a little rundown, her father was John Phillips, and they had this back in the day. It was a huge band, the Mamas and the Papas, and but he was not such a great person. He was not such a great person, and I'm not here to dwell on that. But you're going to see and you're going to hear, and so I kind of want to set the stage for you. Anyway, they sung stuff like, you're probably going to remember, they sung stuff like California Dreaming, and stuff like that. They lived the, highs and lows and all the heartbreak of the generation back then. They wanted, it seemed like, freedom, love, and harmony, but sometimes found chaos instead, right? And I'll say, in my opinion, the entire family was and had chaos, a lot of it. But we're focused here on Mckenzie. But I will tell you, also, in case you don't know, John, with the Mamas and Papas, he was married to Michelle. And Michelle Phillips is not Mckenzie's mom. That's her stepmom, and Susan Adams is his first wife, and that's who is Mckenzie's mom. Okay, just in case y'all want to know, or I'm just setting the tone for you. But Mckenzie was the daughter of John Phillips from the Mamas and the Papas, and Just fame was later in her blood. I mean, it just come natural. And Hollywood ended up her playground. I'm not sure that was a good thing, but it became her playground. She was in American Graffiti at 12 years old. She became a real household name, in my opinion, on One Day at a Time. But let me tell you something, the spotlight didn't always show you the shadows. And they don't with these children. They really don't. Behind these cameras was a child. And Mckenzie, she was dealing with a lot of things in her childhood that no child should ever have to endure. She had dark struggles, and she did battle addiction. Did some of this drive her to addiction? Because addiction is some people think, okay, it's an illness, it's a choice. Maybe it's both. Okay. But yes, I feel regardless that some of this had a huge play in her addiction. I really do. She has not minced any words, and she has not made any secrets about her past. And that, my folks and my friends, are part of a healing process, right? She battled addiction real young, drugs, breakdowns, chaos, and the whole entire world watched her. They watched her rise. They watched her fall. Not once, not twice, but over and over and over again. In 2009, she dropped a truth bomb. Do y'all hear me? She dropped a truth bomb. And it was in her memoir. She has a memoir called High on Arrival. And if y'all don't mind when I mention these books or something like that, if you want to write it in the chat so people will know, please do. I think everybody should read these books. But she had a memoir called High on Arrival. And she revealed she had been in an abusive, incestive, I'm saying that wrong, incest relationship with her father, John Phillips. Now let that sink in. Let that sink in for just a minute. Okay? The very person who was meant to protect her, the very person a lot of people idolized. This is why you should not idolize. Good morning, everybody coming in. Thank you for being here. Thank you. The very person who's her father, her bio blood father, had incest with her. Okay? She was a child. She was a child. And she finally dropped that bombshell. Just let that sink in. So it shocked the world. Some people didn't believe her. In fact, a lot of people didn't believe her. She had to go through that because a lot of people didn't believe her. But guess what? A lot of people did, and a lot of people called her brave. And here's the truth. When a survivor speaks, we all owe them respect, not judgment. That's a fact. Because telling the truth, especially about family, cost a survivor everything. Wow, Lady Q. Wow. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know. No, thank you. Wow. Yeah, even her family, Peggy, took sides. They took sides. And that's what happens. Her father, John Phillips, he died in 2001. He died of heart failure. Okay. And he never truly answered for anything he ever did to her or what Mckenzie said happened, honestly. So his legacy in music remains, you know. So does the shadow of what was done behind closed doors remain too? Of course it does. Hey, Miss Ann, welcome in. Of course it does. Now, we got Mckenzie's biological mother, Susan Adams, and Susan faced her demons too. Susan had a lot of demons. Susan had autism. She went through recovery. Then she got dementia before she passed away. Mckenzie has shared the heartbreak of watching her, she calls her strong mother, fade. Now, dementia's very sad. And yet, also the respect of knowing her mom fought for 18 years of sobriety before she died. Mckenzie can appreciate that. And then here's Michelle Phillips, her stepmother, who publicly humiliated her, in my opinion, who publicly doubted her and doubted Mckenzie's claims. And that's a wound that's very hard to close and heal. When the people around you deny your pain, but Mckenzie's truth has never wavered. She's always said the same thing. And she's always tried to go on with her healing. And she's went on to do great things, in my opinion. Now, let's fast forward a little bit. In 2025, where we're at right now, Mckenzie is 65 years old. So she's still here. And what is she doing? She's speaking out. She's still helping others. She's trying to heal. And she's now working as an addiction counselor at the Breathe Life Healing Centers in Los Angeles. And if y'all want to drop that link, you can. She's out here helping people climb out of the same pits of hell she once fell into. She's also speaking at recovery events. She's telling her story, and she's lending her story to others who need hope and help. And yes, she still does post on social media. She goes out with her son, Shane, sometimes. Not a lot, but sometimes. And she shows up at memorials in Hollywood and gatherings and stuff like that in California. She's not hiding. She is living. Mckenzie is doing great things today with her life. And she has overcome so much. So much. Hello, welcome in. She battled addiction young, like I said, drugs, chaos, breakups, incest. You know, make anybody do drugs, in my opinion. I'm just saying. Her world, our world, the whole world watched her rise, watched her fall, watched her get up, watched her fall down, watched her get up, all the things. But she did it. And in April of 2009, again, she dropped that truth bomb in her memoir called High on Arrival. She revealed she had been in an abusive incest relationship with her bio father, John Phillips. That shocked the world. You know, people we respect and stuff like that, sometimes you don't know them at all. But we owe the victims respect. That's who we owe respect, for telling the truth, for helping people, for telling their stories. Kimberly says, I'm still standing strong. Or she is still standing strong. Good for her. She is at 65 years old out there doing what she needs to do, helping people. Standing strong. Standing strong. Absolutely. And for those just coming in, her father died in 2001 of heart failure, and he never answered for anything he ever did or what he was accused of to her. Okay, so let's watch something. I want to show y'all here. I got lots of videos. This is, I think, going to be a good one. Drop these people's link. You know, all this is for teaching. I hope helping somebody, lessons, criticism, you know, anything that's under the act, Copyright Act. And I will be sharing everybody, giving them credit and, you know, all the things. But I think this is a very good one. And if I have to say so myself, I'm sorry, but I do. Please hit that thumbs up, share. Let's get her story out there. We never know what person it can help. Hold on, and we'll start sharing.
Sure about memory with all the drugs you've gone through. When you relive a life, do you know what happened?
I absolutely know what happened.
There's no doubt in your mind, because sometimes, you know, we can imagine things and we've told it so much to ourselves, it didn't happen.
We can imagine things, but this has been a part of my consciousness and a part of my life for 31 years. I know what happened. I'm a fairly present, bright human being who has lived a difficult life, but is here to tell the story. And
right. Yeah. Now, you knew, being smart, that once you reveal this and go on a program like this, your world changes. People don't look at you the same way. You realize that?
Yes, I do realize that, but this isn't about me. This really has become about the thousands and possibly millions of people who are trying to live through this.
You would, girl.
Live through whatever it is they're trying to live through, and there's no one representing this part of the population.
I think she could help so many people.
We, this community of survivors, if you want to call it that, is incredibly underrepresented as a group of human beings.
How do you know they're out there?
How can they not be? The stories are rampant.
You've run into others?
Since Oprah Winfrey aired and the book came out, I have a large fan base on Facebook, and I wish I had brought some of these printouts. Incest survivors have been writing me all day long. Your courage. Now I feel like I can actually go on with my life. Now I feel like I'm not alone, and I felt so alone, and nobody ever talks about this. And there's very little in this world that is taboo today. But this subject is still like, shove it under the carpet, sweep it away, protect the abuser, deny the reality, and let that person, you're on your own, kid.
Now, let's go back.
Yeah.
And it's 1979, right? You're 19 years old.
Yes,
this
sir.
is when this first happened. The night before you're supposed to marry Jeff Sessler, who is a member of the entourage of the Rolling Stones, right?
Yes.
Was this your engagement? You're about to get married? You were very happy?
Yeah, we were very happy. We were engaged, but we were both heavily into drugs as well.
But you didn't marry that day?
No, I did not.
What happened that day?
The night before, my father came to Florida with the intention to stop the union. Nobody wanted me to marry Jeff. And I went over to my father's hotel room, and he had a lot of drugs. I had a lot of drugs. We took a lot of drugs. And all I remember is arriving in the room, getting high. And then I remember sort of, kind of, I don't know if you know this. You probably don't know this. If you're in a blackout and you're not in your body and then you come to in your body, I was in the act of having sex with my father.
What did you think?
What did I think?
Yeah.
I thought, how did this happen? How did I end up here? And plus, which I was on drugs. So, I mean, there's that element of, is this really real?
And he was on drugs.
Absolutely.
What did he say?
He didn't say anything at that time. I was probably cognizant for less than a minute, slid back into a blackout, and woke up in my own hotel room the next day.
Don't remember anything from that time on?
No.
When was the next time you saw him?
Probably the next day.
What did he say?
We didn't speak about it until I brought it up to him several months later. And I said to him...
What were the circumstances then?
We were in New York, and he was living off of Houston, and he was sitting in a rocking chair, and I remember the lighting was sort of, low. And I'd gone over there to talk to him because I was very disturbed by this reality. And I said, Dad, we really...
You're still taking drugs?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I said, we really need to talk about what happened in Florida. We need to talk about how, and I used the word rape for want of a better word, how you raped me. And he said, raped you? Don't you mean when we made love? And I thought to myself, wow, I'm so screwed. I sort of closed my mind to it and put it in a little emotional mental box and took it out and looked at it every once in a while, but I never really, what do you do? What do you do?
Where was your mother?
My mother and I weren't really in contact that much then, but I was with my mother a couple days ago, and I laid it all out for her. I told her about it. I told my Aunt Rosie about it. And I said, what should we do? This is wrong. I've been violated, And they said, you're really risking a lot if you go after him. And I said, well, I don't want his life. I don't want bad things to happen to him, but I also don't want bad things to happen to me as a result of this. And I was convinced to let it lie.
Now, you write, sex with my father was like a runaway train. I felt like I had no power to do anything about it. And you say it was consensual. How soon after the first time did it occur again?
The way it occurred after the first time, nothing occurred for, I was 18, 19 years old. Nothing occurred for probably 3 or 4 years. Then I went on the road with the New Mamas and the Papas. And I was with my dad on a daily basis. And there were lots and lots of drugs involved.
And your stepmother was there too?
No, she was at home with the kids,
okay.
The younger kids. I have younger brothers and sisters, quite a lot younger than I am. And we would take drugs and do the show and, all that kind of insanity. And I started waking up in my father's hotel room bed I wore a lot of leggings, those tight black legging pants back in the 80s because it was, really big then. And I would wake up with them down around my ankles. And I would think, where am I? How did this happen? And I look over and I'm in my father's bed and he's sleeping next to me. And this happened. It didn't happen, as I've said, it didn't happen every day. It didn't happen every week. It occurred.
Did he have any guilt?
Look, my father lived in a world of his own creation. He was a great man. There's a fine line between genius and insanity, as we all know. He tried very hard to live a life of his choosing. And I think, and this is only my point of view, I think that to him, if sex happened between a father and a daughter and nobody protested, where's the problem? I can't speak for what he thought.
Did you talk to anyone about this?
I talked look, this isn't the kind of thing where you call up your friend and say, hey, guess what?
So who did you tell? No one?
There are people who have known for many, many years, and people are coming out of the woodwork. I got a call today from a woman I worked with on the road with my dad, and she said, I remember you telling me about this in 91. Told boyfriends about it in the 90s, and several of them promptly broke up with me the following day.
Were you high most of the time?
Not a fair amount of the time, sure.
So, wow, there she told it all. She told it to Larry King before Larry King died. And, this is, the channel is Politics News, Politics. Y'all go look at that. But she's also got it in her memoir, and she is staying steady. And to this day, you know. So yeah, there was that. There was that. Let's see. Hold on just a minute.
Now, this is the Fox 11 10 o'clock news.
Actress and recovering addict Mckenzie Phillips is using her experiences to help others heal. Actress Mckenzie Phillips knows about hitting bottom. Drug addiction took her there.
Phillips got help. She's sober now, and now she's helping others. Julie Chang is here with more on Mckenzie Phillips' new path.
Good evening to you, and good evening to you at home. Mckenzie Phillips is only 56 years old, but it feels like she's lived 1,000 lives.
Now, this
And
was
now
when she was
she wants to use that
56.
wisdom
She's
to help
65
others
now.
heal.
Annie and I are moving in.
After years of battling substance abuse,
This is how y'all will
Take a
remember her
breath and
probably
breathe.
one day at a time.
Mckenzie Phillips is breathing a sigh of relief. Today is her first day on the job as an addiction counselor at Breathe.
More people die from drug overdoses than die from car crashes. You know, people are using prescribed opioids, and then the doctor goes, "Yeah, I'm cutting you off." And then, you know, you're paying $80 for an OxyContin pill, right? People think it's a really far jump from, wow, I can't afford Oxy anymore, to heroin.
Okay, I want to say something. People think that's a joke. It's not a joke. There are people out there who will pay $40, $50, $60, $70, $80 and more for one little Oxy pill. I think that's important to know. Anybody on the streets knows it. Anybody who's been around it knows it. One pill. Think about these people who are, and this, and I'm not talking about her because I'm just talking about the healthcare system. This is why you can't also get the drugs you need or pain medicine you need when you need it. Okay? You can't. But think about maybe somebody on Medicaid or something like that getting free pills, not taking them, 30, 60, 90 in there, whatever. Don't pay anything for them. And they're getting 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and more for a pill. Because somebody that's on drugs will pay for it, does need it because they get hooked on it, and can't get doctors to write. I'm just saying. And then there goes some of your drug dealers. I'm just saying. Let's carry on.
Telling you people, that is not as far a jump as you might seem.
The former child star of One Day at a Time first entered rehab when she was just 17. She would go on to have about 10 more rehab visits before she realized it was time to stop the unfortunate cycle that had troubled her famous family, including her father, the founder of the Mamas and the Papas, John Phillips.
My father was a very troubled man. You know, I don't think that he held me in his arms the first time when I was a little baby and went, "Oh, good, a girl child. I'm going to groom her and I'm going to sexually abuse her when she gets older." I don't think that's how it happened.
Would you recommend Breathe for someone like your dad?
I would recommend Breathe for anyone with a substance use disorder or an eating disorder.
Breathe Life Healing Center, which boasts a 22-acre treatment facility in Laurel Canyon, uses a multi-layer healing strategy. It includes diet, lifestyle, and even therapy for the entire family.
Breathe actually treats the mind, body, spirit component.
And Mckenzie says treatment centers like Breathe are more available than you think.
If you are planning an intervention on your child or your loved one, make sure that they have good insurance before you intervene.
Do you feel like this was what you were meant to do?
Absolutely.
Mckenzie says she just is so grateful to be alive. She began counseling others back in 2013, but like we said, today was her very first day on the job at Breathe. And according to the CDC, heroin use in the U.S. has more than doubled since 2007. So her help is definitely coming at a time of need.
And finally, people are realizing that this illness is as prevalent as it is, and we're seeing it differently.
Yeah, we're
with
seeing
compassion
it differently.
rather than with arrests and with punishment.
Yeah, and you know what? Now when people use heroin, they're seeing that they mix it with something else, and that's why they believe they're seeing more deaths.
Yeah.
And she said it doesn't have to be this way.
What a big step for her to work day in and day out, helping others on this.
Yeah, she said the part for her was that her 29-year-old son said, "Mom, I'm really proud of you."
Oh, very good. All right. Thank you, Julie.
Julie, thanks.
And I'm glad she finally broke that cycle. And, you know, she had her son there for her and all the things. Yeah, this can be very triggering, y'all, at the same time. So please take heed. And we're doing the hopeful healing, the life of Mckenzie Phillips. And so let's all hit the thumbs up. I think this story can help somebody. I really do. There's lots of moving parts to it, and we're going to get into it. I'm fixing to put on another video. It may be a little bit longer. Hold on just a moment.
Was all going in her nose.
This is my crisis.
I started snorting cocaine, and then I started injecting cocaine, and then I started injecting heroin.
My father taught me how to shoot up.
I never thought she would make it to her 20th birthday.
Wherever she went, it's like driving past the accident that you have to look at.
I think throughout all of this stuff that she's gone through, I think is a survival instinct.
I've never known anybody who had so many lives and survived it as well as she did.
Alexandria, Virginia in the 1950s was a staid, middle-class suburb. But it was here that a little girl who would grow up in rock and roll's fastest lane, Laura Mckenzie Phillips, was born on November 10, 1959. Her mother, Susie Adams Phillips, was the daughter of a wealthy Baltimore horse breeder. Her father was an unknown songwriter named
Oh
John.
my God, she looks just like her bio mom.
He was a very sexy man.
Did y'all see
and
that?
And he was quite forward. You know, he was very forward. He would not hesitate to pick up on a good-looking woman.
And marriage never altered that pattern. There were separations, and Laura Mckenzie was conceived during a one-night reconciliation. She joined a brother 2 years older.
Good to see you, Terry.
She was the funniest little thing. She was perfect. Actually, she was perfect. From the day I brought her home from the hospital, she did not cry. Mac didn't cry. She just was a perfect baby.
Laura was nicknamed Mac, short for her middle name, Mckenzie, which had been a grandmother's. The family was moving around the country while John performed with his folk group. Susie's blue blood parents had cut off all financial support to the young family, predicting their daughter's marriage to an aspiring folk singer would never work. They were soon proved right. The reason's name was stunning, blonde, 16-year-old Holly Michelle Gilliam.
And he just fell in love with Michelle. And I thought, well, it's an infatuation. She's like a babysitter to some people, you know, at 16 years old. And I think probably about 6 months later, he said, you know what a mistress is. He said, I want to keep Michelle as my mistress, and I'm going to keep you as my wife. And I said, you know what you can do with that, don't you? You can stuff it.
The marriage was over. 3-year-old Mckenzie and her 5-year-old brother went back to the Baltimore area with their mother, who worked as a secretary at the Pentagon to support them. But she made sure the children saw their father. John and Michelle married and were living in New York. His band, the New Journeymen, was performing in Greenwich Village. Mckenzie was often sent to visit.
and she was a little scrapper, but she had a lot of personality. And it didn't surprise me when she grew up to be an actress and a singer, because she always called. I remember we were shopping once at Saks in New York, and someone got into the elevator with us, and without being asked at all, she just turned and looked at them and said, "My name is Laura, and I'm a model." She was about 5.
John was training Michelle to sing, but they weren't getting many gigs. Evicted from their apartment, they fled to the Virgin Islands for a working vacation. Soon they were joined by the other half of what would become the Mamas and the Papas, Denny Doherty and Cass Elliott.
When Cass arrived, she arrived with a bottle of liquid LSD with a dropper, and we were living on the beach in tents. We were, well, for all intents and purposes, we were dropping acid and snorkeling.
Despite the daily diet of marijuana, alcohol, and psychedelics, John was cranking out new songs for the band. He sent for his 5-year-old daughter, and Mckenzie was allowed to go for what was supposed to be a short visit with the hippie tribe in the islands. She slept in her own little pup tent.
It was scary, and I remember scorpions and bugs, but I was, I was pretty into it because I was with my dad, and he wanted me around, and that was big for me. I remember sneaking into the town because there wasn't much food and there wasn't any money. And you remember the song Creaky Alley? John and Mitchie, that was all about that time, and it was living on American Express card, tents, low rents, and that was the whole deal. So my dad would send me to other camps on the beach to steal food.
I remember her coming back with a new pair of shoes once, and I thought, boy, this is getting out of hand. Somebody had bought her a new pair of shoes, some sailor.
5-year-old Mckenzie would go to a restaurant in town by herself and charm sailors out of breakfast.
And then one day my dad, some money came from the States, and he took me in there for breakfast, and the waitress said, "This is her 3rd breakfast today. Did you know that?" So that, I was learning some survival tactics very early.
John kept Mckenzie for 5 months without consulting her mother. She was frantic. Finally, Mckenzie was put on a plane home.
She was so dirty, and she just looked like a little waif.
Mackenzie's adventure with her father was over. John Phillips' band was broke and forced to leave the islands. But he had created a wealth of music. The band headed to California and were christened the Mamas and the Papas. Producer Lou Adler quickly signed them, and success was instant and enormous.
We met Lou, who we sang the whole first album for, and who liked it very much, and gave us enough money to buy some clothing and some food. And since then, it's been a perpetual income rise,
The Mamas and the Papas sound was a fresh, harmonic melding of 2 genres, folk and rock, lushly orchestrated.
Uh-oh, sorry. I keep forgetting I'm mute. Y'all will probably remember them for all these songs. I mean, like I said, the songs were very popular and everything. And, you even heard Michelle Phillips talk about how smart Mckenzie was. I think Mckenzie was brilliant at a very young age. I really do. Something probably too good for her own good sometimes, to be honest. And then with the things that was going on, with her father and different things like that, just in my opinion. But, then she got into the drugs and stuff. But she's a very smart person. She still is, in my opinion. I stopped it because I wanted y'all to know it's playing music and stuff. I don't know if YouTube, sometimes they come back and make me punch a button and erase the music. And if it does, it'll still show everything or hear me talking or whatever. It'll just get out the background music for me. But I don't care. I want to play this. I want to listen to this. I want to hear this. I want other people to hear this. I think other people can learn from this. I really do. And that's just in my heart. It's in my heart. I could be wrong, but hopefully it touches somebody. So again, if you, share or you like or whatever, it does get it out there for people to hear. There could be another Mckenzie out there somewhere. And I'm sure there is, honestly. I appreciate her honesty. I really appreciate her honesty. She's always been honest. For those coming in that's missed it, Lady Q actually knows Mckenzie Phillips. I told her she needs to reconnect with her and bring her on over here, honey. Just saying. I always watched her when I was younger on One Day at a Time. And that's where I think she was in America Graffiti. She was in a lot of things, and she did a lot of things. But I think that's where everybody might remember her most. Just me. I don't know.
The winning formula would change the course of American pop music. John's songs may have romanticized hippie poverty, but by the time the Mamas and the Papas had top billing at the legendary Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, the band was overdosing on money. California Dreamin' and Monday Monday were among 9 songs in the top 40 in the next 2 years. Mackenzie's mother moved the family west to be near Papa John Phillips. Mackenzie next saw her father. He was shopping for Jaguars with shoeboxes full of cash. His drug dealers were getting rich, but not his children or his ex-wife.
He didn't support me at all. Actually, I had him served at the Monterey Pop Festival, right on stage. I went to an attorney and I said, he's making millions and I'm getting nothing.
Mckenzie was shuttled back and forth between her parents, and despite the upheaval, was such a good student, her school skipped her a year. The earnest scholar became accustomed to finding the likes of the Rolling Stones and the Beatles in her father's living room, where there were bowls of marijuana on the coffee table. Mckenzie did what she could to get the attention of the distracted adults, and was delighted when she got it.
The night of the Hollywood Bowl show, Michelle decided that she would dress me in a tie-dyed t-shirt. It was like a dress. And she used pink thread and ice and a sewing needle and a piece of cork and pierced my ears and hung peacock feathers from my ears. I was the mascot. I was like the little doll.
Oh God, do y'all remember? Do y'all remember taking the toothpicks and the ice cubes and piercing your ears? Oh Lord, honey. And do you remember the feathers? Them feathers. I know we thought the feathers was the bomb back in the time, back in the late 70s, early 80s. and the, shall I say, the roach clips, the roach clips that had the feathers on them, we would wear them, we would clip them to our jeans. We would clip them to our jeans just for the feathers, honey, just for the feathers. You didn't have to smoke weed. You just, it was a thing to have the feathers. I'm just saying, this brings up some memory. Lord, honey, I'm just saying. That's just, I'm just telling y'all. Yeah, this is an inspiring story, y'all. Hello, everybody coming in. Welcome. Hi, Angel Wings.
Very happy to be playing this role because I was so starving for that acceptance. I just wanted my dad to want me around.
The life was thrilling, and Mckenzie determined early on that she wanted a career in show business too. From 1965 to 1968, the Mamas and the Papas ruled the charts, but Mackenzie's home life would soon fracture again. Papa John Phillips' drug use was spinning out of control. Then when John's wife Michelle had a brief affair with Denny Doherty, the dysfunctional Rock family spontaneously combusted. The band broke up in 1968, but the royalties were still rolling in, and so were the party favors. Mckenzie and her brother were doing LSD themselves by the age of 11.
Good morning,
We would
Raymond.
sneak out at night and drop acid. And this was like when I was 11. I was smoking cigarettes. And certainly a lot of this was fueled by the fact that all this stuff was available every weekend at our dad's house.
I remember seeing mounds of cocaine on the coffee table. And I know that she saw it, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if she was helping herself to it at the tender age of 12 or 13.
But Mackenzie's mother's home was no haven of stability either. She had remarried, and the children were terrified of their new stepfather.
He hit me, he beat me. He was a very violent man. And my children hated him so much that they left to go live with their dad. That's how bad he was.
At her father's house, by necessity, Mckenzie grew even more independent. She formed her own rock band with her friends, and in 1971, they performed at an amateur night at a legendary club called the Troubadour. A casting director spotted her.
I thought she, had something. I thought she was very cute and energetic and in control and very professional for such a kid. I think she was only 11 or something.
Casting director Fred Roos started suggesting Mckenzie for movie auditions, but she had no one to drive her, so he picked her up himself.
I remember going there, this house in, I think, Bel Air, and I didn't even meet any parents. Nobody came out and says, okay, here she is, She would just run out of the house and get in my car, and we'd go, and I'd bring her back. I never saw John or her. I don't think to this day I've ever met her mother. And her hair was usually ratty, like she didn't know how to do it, or nobody had taken care to get her prepped for an interview.
In 1971, Fred Roos found Mackenzie's first role in a very special script. Her first movie would be none other than American Graffiti. Thirteen-year-old Mckenzie Phillips made her screen debut in 1973, playing the equally precocious adolescent hitchhiker in George Lucas's American Graffiti.
Oh, no. You thought I'd tell you where I live? Not me. Not old Carol. The night is young, and I'm not hitting the rack till I get a little action.
Critics raved that Mckenzie was a natural, and no wonder.
Your heart went out to that kid in that car. It wasn't charisma, it was desperation. It was a teen lost. And that's what they captured in the movie. A teen desperately seeking attention who projected it on screen before anybody knew it was happening in real life.
In an omen of what was to come, Mckenzie next appeared in the widely watched TV movie, Go Ask Alice, about teenage drug use.
You got any uppers left? I don't know you. What's the matter? You're in a blackout. I brought you here.
Now it was Mackenzie's turn in the limelight, and she was determined to have at least as much fun as her parents had had, even if she was barely 14.
She was just wild. She asked me if she could go to the whiskey one night, and I said, sure, but you've got to be back by 1 a.m. And I thought that for a 14-year-old, I was being rather liberal. And then she asked her dad, because she didn't like the response that she got from me. So her dad said, he said, yeah, you can go to the whiskey, but I want you home at 4 a.m. None of this dawn.
Wow.
Mckenzie was hungry for her father's attention, but she was in desperate need of some discipline. She spent her evenings partying on Sunset Strip with a much older crowd. Still too young to drive, she hitchhiked. When she was 14, she paid a terrible price.
Oh, many years ago, she told me, where she had been hitchhiking and she had gotten a ride from this man who then took her up to the hills and raped her. And then somewhere along the line let her out of the car. She told John after the fact, who then subsequently was ready to go gunning for the guy.
After the rape, Mckenzie got counseling, But her lifestyle changed little. She still lived with her father, who was now remarried to actress Genevieve Waite, and still there were no rules or structure in his home. Yet still, there were plenty of drugs. Television parts came Mckenzie's way, and she was now commanding more than $1,000 a week as
Exactly,
an actress.
Raymond. Exactly.
She took over as the star of the family, and there was nobody who could tell her not to do drugs because there were so many drugs in the house that it would seem a bit hypocritical.
Mckenzie spent her sophomore and junior years in high school frequenting nightclubs and discos, where she was welcomed through the velvet rope and served white wine in tall glasses. If authorities stopped in, the underage star was whisked out of sight by the owners.
Mckenzie was Miss Attitude. I remember when she was going out one night, seeing the guy that she was with, he was probably about 40 years old, balding with glitter over his eyes and platform heels. And
see, though, why your young girl, I mean, even if you're in Hollywood, you're letting her out on Sunset Strip, and I know she was a wild child. I know that. She'll be the first one to admit it. I'm not saying anything that she won't admit, because she at least has took accountability, and she can help so many people, and she does, and that's why I'm doing this stream, because I feel it can help somebody. But again, so many adults let her down. So many let her down. I mean, the coke in front of her, the drugs in front of her, the no restrictions, the letting her go at 14 on Sunset Boulevard. Oh, and Michelle thought it was be in at 12 or 1 or 2 or whatever. And then her father, no, you can be in at 4. I mean, really? Really, folks? I mean, she had a horrible time, a horrible life, in my opinion. Thank you, Raymond Thomas. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Thank you. Somebody got a gifted membership. Welcome to Smiley Squad. Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate you all so much. I appreciate you, Raymond. I know you've been working so hard. Hey, Tina girl. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome in. But yeah, I do feel like she was let down by a lot of people, you know, and then they didn't believe her. Why wouldn't you believe her? You knew what she was up against, and she was a child.
and she was in a skirt up to her crotch. And it just didn't look like this was a very healthy environment for her to be in. She had money, and she was very cocky.
One weekend in 1974, John Phillips and his new wife took off for New York for what they said would be a few days. They never came back. Mckenzie and her brother Jeffrey moved in with an aunt, John's sister Rosemary. The same year, Mama Cass Elliott died of a heart attack, and it seemed all John Phillips had left of those glory days were the royalty checks and the drugs. But Mackenzie's star was still rising. At 15, she made another movie, Rafferty and the Gold Dust Twins. And the next year, she would become even more famous.
That's not fair! You knew you were going to say that all along! That's not fair! You're not fair! I'm surprised you don't want me to wear a chastity belt! If there's a sale on them, we'll get one!
In 1975, she won the role of Julie on One Day at a Time, Norman Lear's popular sitcom about a divorcee raising 2 daughters alone. One Day at a Time co-starred Bonnie Franklin and Valerie Bertinelli, and would become a top 20 favorite.
I had seen her a few years prior in American Graffiti, and I thought, oh no, she's too old and too tall to be my daughter. I mean, I'm this short drink of water. And then we met. And we both had these big teeth and big mouths, and I thought, well, it's going to work. And there was some kind of stuff that worked between the two of us. She was very out there, very open, and she was playing a troubled teen.
Mckenzie felt different from the start. The other actresses came from stable nuclear families, and Mckenzie was unaccustomed to so much normalcy.
We came from different places and came together and made a family. And Mac's feeling was, whoa, this isn't my world. Well, I don't know anything about this. On the other hand, family was very important to her. So family, regardless of whether she really had it or wanted it, here it was for her during this period of time.
Come on, Mom. Let me try. I mean, if I'm going to make a mistake, why don't you let me learn by myself? Okay?
Mckenzie hid behind her dark glasses and clothes, and others on the set attributed her erratic behavior to coming from a rock and roll family.
We only knew the Mckenzie that pulled herself together in the morning and came to work as a bubbly adolescent, played a wonderful character, had a lot of edge to her. She loved us all. We loved her back. We saw nothing of the other Mckenzie. She was play acting in life as she came to work.
And you know what? You know, she was very smart actress, very intelligent, and very brave. There's not many people that can pull off doing this with, you know, in front of cameras, acting, remembering your lines, doing everything she did, you know, in the movie business and you know, everything like that, and having the kind of outside life she had at home. I can't imagine, because I would be all over the place if, and think about y'all too, if something like traumatic was happening at home, or even the drugs, she pulled herself together, you know, long enough to do this. And some people are just functioning addicts. Some people are functioning addicts. That's part of drugs. You know, we need to do a whole nother live on that too. But anyway, for her to remember her lines, to study, to do what she did, she was a very brilliant girl. I couldn't do it. You know, sometimes we have stress in our lives, or we get upset at home over one little thing, maybe a little argument, and we can't even get out the front door to go to work, or we can't even come on here, or we can't even do this or do that for the stress, because we can't think right. You know? She was brilliant, in my opinion. Brilliant. That's just me, in my opinion.
In the morning, and as she went out at night at home.
Mckenzie attended the Hollywood Professional School with Valerie Bertinelli, but when she made disparaging remarks about the school staff to a magazine, she was expelled. Yet her canny intelligence was apparent to everyone.
She was the smartest young woman, and I taught school, and I knew the difference between people acting smart and people who were smart. And it is her smartness, her deep intelligence, that actually worked against her, because she was able to, because of her smartness, keep this act going for much longer than most people would think it could survive.
What her colleagues on the set had not yet realized was that Mckenzie was developing a severe dependency on cocaine. She was making close to $50,000 a week and had developed a $1,000 a week habit. Rarely did she make it to work on time. She managed to get away with it by sheer force of personality.
She had a way of coming in late, and she entered a room, and we all felt guilty that she was late. I don't know how she ever did that. I used to say, how did she manage to do that? And she'd be the one at fault, but she had a way of maneuvering the situation that the rest of us felt it was our fault.
Mckenzie bought her own house in Laurel Canyon, and now the only adult supervision she had was on the set. Her own mother was incapacitated by her abusive husband, and it fell to Mckenzie to rescue her from that situation.
Matt happened to call one night, and Leonard picked up the phone, He had beat me unconscious.
Gigi, welcome.
Mac hung up the phone and called the
morning.
police. Mac had a house in Laurel Canyon. So she said, Mommy, I want you to go there and contact an attorney and divorce him. So I did. It was that quick. She saved my life. She was about 18. She saved my life. Thank God. If it hadn't been for her, I would have been dead.
But Mckenzie could not save herself and had no one coming to her aid. Her public image as a healthy American teenager shattered the week of her 18th birthday. She was found sprawled semi-conscious on a Hollywood street and arrested for disorderly conduct while under the influence of drugs or alcohol. She was put on probation and sent into counseling, but continued at one day at a time. The rock and roll high life never missed a beat, especially when she visited her father in New York. An example of the lifestyle, one evening Mckenzie spent with Mick Jagger that she related years later to TV Guide. She has been asked about the dubious distinction of sleeping with the rock star ever since.
I'd known him since I was a kid. We were at a party, and we went to make tuna fish sandwiches with my dad, and Mick said, "We have no mayonnaise, John, go get some mayonnaise." And basically my father left the room, the apartment. Mick locked the door and turned to me and said, "I've been waiting for this since you were 10 years old."
It was just a fascinating story about drug use and Hollywood and the life of rock and roll, where people don't seem to care about anything, how old you are, whether you're, the daughter of a friend, it doesn't matter.
Mckenzie's relationship with her father would be a lifelong struggle and often seemed no warmer than that of any rock and roll star with a diehard fan.
She came to me one Friday and she said, "Patricia, my dad is coming. My dad's coming tonight to see me. Do you have to save seats for him?" I said, "Absolutely. What seats do you want?" And she pointed to the seats in the audience. She wanted that one and that one. Okay. He might be a little late. He said he might be a little late. I said, "Not a problem. No one will ever sit in those seats. Those seats are for your father." And all night long, she looked out at those two empty seats. All night. It's an image that has stuck with me. I see her face. I see the sadness on her face, the disappointment, the expectation.
Many more expectations would be dashed before Mckenzie Phillips turned 20, and she still had a long way to go before she'd hit rock bottom. Mckenzie Phillips was just 19 in 1978, but the troubled young sitcom star was dating a much older, married man, 35-year-old Peter Asher, a successful record producer. Then, Mckenzie suddenly eloped with someone else, 25-year-old Jeff Sessler, who worked as a gopher for the Rolling Stones. Her shocked family and friends feared he was her drug dealer. Mckenzie had known him for just 3 weeks.
It was lust. It was drugs. It was love. It was me exercising my free will, and I just ran off.
Sessler denied he sold drugs. It wasn't necessary. Mckenzie had plenty of her own money for drug connections.
We had a connection. She had one and I had one. I think we used them both very well.
While away on their honeymoon, they watched on TV as her house in Laurel Canyon burned down in brush fires sweeping the Hollywood Hills.
And we were horrified. And so our life started in a turmoil, which was a perfectly good excuse to move down the road to the Chateau Marmont and get a bunch of drugs and deal with our pain.
Mckenzie's career was flaming out as well. Sessler wanted to make Mckenzie into a rock and roll singer, and he kept her up all night in drug-fueled recording sessions. Mornings, she struggled to get to the set of One Day at a Time. A cast that had once felt like family was coming unglued.
What happens when things do get bad is that when it doesn't work, it affects everybody. You do work as a team when you're doing that when you're doing a family show.
Mckenzie didn't look like a wholesome big sister anymore. The cocaine had given her a constantly running nose, rotting teeth, and the 5'7" actress had dropped to 90 pounds. Producers had her wear pads under her clothes just to look normal. Mckenzie was full of excuses.
She was upset, or she wasn't feeling well, or she had a flu, or something was happening, whatever it was. We all got sucked into that life in some way. We all got sucked into enabling her behavior, all from love.
A good friend, her former co-star in American Graffiti, once took Mckenzie to a hospital after an overdose. It was one of many.
I don't know. There's something very magnetic about her. And no matter how bad she is or how stoned she ever got, I don't know why. I stuck with her. And I can think of other people that would be doing the same thing. And I would just like go, you know what? This isn't working for me. I would like leave them. But with Mckenzie, you just wound up putting up with a lot.
The producers agreed Mckenzie was suffering fatigue and ordered her to take 6 weeks off.
I mean, they cared. They knew there was a problem, but they did not understand how to deal with the problem at the time. I mean, she was, in a strange way, a forerunner of how to deal with drugs in Hollywood. And they didn't deal with them correctly because they didn't know how to deal with them.
Mckenzie spent the time off going to the dentist, but not getting any help for addiction. And she was still performing for the cameras.
A lot of that was for the pain
If you watched the
pills.
camera that was not
I'm
on
sure.
her, the camera that was on her waiting for her to come back on the line, you could see that kind of slightly glazed thing. But the minute her camera came on, she was there. That's the smartness of Mckenzie.
She had this unbelievable ability to pull herself together, no matter how she felt, at any given second, and fool everyone. It was actually quite funny because she proved it to me in the beginning. She came to me and said, I feel like this. And she went into a total crying, and I went to hold her. And as I got close to hold her, because I felt like she was really hurting, she turned around and started smiling at me. So that's how I could do it.
Finally, in February of 1980, that talented actress was called in for a meeting with the show's producers. Mckenzie actually believed she was going to get a raise. Instead, she was given a choice: quit or be fired. Stunned, she agreed to resign for personal reasons. 2 months later, her rushed marriage was over as well. Mckenzie's troubles were all over the press, and her humiliation.
Have a good day, Raymond. Get you some rest, honey.
1980 was not an easy year for the Phillips family. Next, Mckenzie's father was arrested for conspiracy to distribute narcotics and faced 8 years in prison.
I wasn't surprised. I had kind of known what was going on. I mean, there were huge bottles, pharmaceutical bottles, of Quaaludes and Dilaudid and pills all over the house. And the lifestyle was deteriorating. There were needles on the floor and blood on the bathroom ceilings. And my father taught me how to shoot up. I remember he had his like half glasses on the edge of his nose, and he's looking down at my arm with the needle and
Let that sink in, folks. Just let that sink in. And everybody in the meantime was idolizing them, how sad what he was teaching her to do and helping her do, rather than taking some of that money or energy or whatever and getting her help, whether they needed help or not. It's kind of like, if you can't beat them, join them, or bring them to you, tempt them. But this was his child. This was his child, his brilliant child. Let that sink in, people. And then back in the day, the lewds, those were the things. They don't even make those anymore, I don't think. But the gelatos and stuff like that, I mean, that's something you get in the hospital that's so strong. I don't know, Millie might can answer this, but I was told in the emergency room, like if you're admitted or something, that's like one of the strongest drugs ever. Well, that is like, back then, she was a child, what she was doing and what she was taking. My God. Kimberly said, I got to tell you a real quick about my dream last night. You and I got a letter that we could come visit Sebastian. You picked me up, and we went to a small home with an older man who had a horse. I wish, honey, I wish that was a true and not a dream. Nothing more that I would like than somebody call me and say, Smiley, come here and look. Is this Sebastian? And me go find Sebastian and call Seth and say, Seth, guess what? You're not going to believe this. Yeah, I know. Sometimes dreams, I believe in dreams. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you absolutely for sharing that.
That was the first person that ever shot me up, and he taught me how to do it.
Hoping for leniency from the court, John Phillips entered a drug rehabilitation program, and Mckenzie joined him in her first attempt to get clean. The two became high-profile counselors themselves, work that earned John a light 30-day sentence. They seemed sincere.
After I got fired from One Day at a Time, I just remember sleeping half the day away, getting up, doing drugs, staying up the entire night doing drugs.
I was addicted, my wife was addicted, my son was addicted, and my daughter was addicted. We spent well over $1 million between us. One time I had 5 Rolls Royces, and I sold them all one after the other, at fire sale prices for drug addiction. I sold everything I ever owned and put it in my arm.
The father-daughter model of rehabilitation went on the speaking circuit together and appeared on television discussing their decline.
If you're taking drugs, try and stop and get help. And if you're not, don't start. It's not worth it. It really isn't. It's not as glamorous as it's cracked up to be.
There was just one problem. The counseling program required that they detox from drugs, but allowed them to drink alcohol. After speeches, they'd get drunk with the other drug counselors. Now supposedly clean, in 1981, Mckenzie won her job back one day at a time.
Oh, it was very hard. I think she was more nervous going back than when she first started when she was 13 years old when she was acting.
Well, I thought you finally grew up.
Oh, I've grown up all right. You're not the only one who's had a lover. Hurts, doesn't it?
She was drinking heavily, and Mckenzie had gained back far too much weight.
You're the most important thing in the world to me.
Oh, Max.
Within a year, Mckenzie returned to cocaine. Her co-stars were not mystified this time.
We're sitting in my kitchen, and she's sitting across from me, and she says, Lem, I know when I'm driving to get it, it's a mistake. I know when I'm paying the guy for a bag, it's a mistake. And I know when I'm doing it afterwards, it's a mistake. I cannot stop.
Mckenzie still wanted to hang out with her father, and she still wanted to be a rock and roll star. When her father formed a new version of the Mamas and the Papas in 1982, Mckenzie sang the parts of Michelle Phillips.
Sally said, Jenny, you know there are many who can sing a song the way that you do. Let's go now.
The band toured the country, but never achieved its former greatness.
And it was just such a mishmash. It was, and then they would sing One Day at a Time. It was embarrassing.
The producers at One Day at a Time now had a clause in Mackenzie's contract requiring drug tests on demand. And one day in 1983, Mckenzie passed out on the set.
Mackenzie's last firing was really dramatic. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that's a bad scene in a Danielle Steele movie, where the star is lying on the couch and the producer comes over and shakes her awake.
And she was very groggy. She really almost was incoherent. I said, Mac, I have to ask you for a urine sample. And she looked at me and she said, Patricia, if you wait until tomorrow, it'll be okay. Can you please wait until tomorrow? And I said, no, I can't. I'm sorry. And she sat up, pulled herself up, and she said, there's no point. I'll just leave. She picked herself up and she left. And that's the last most of us saw her for a very long time.
Mckenzie was fired that very day. The cast was devastated.
That left a real pall over the cast. We didn't rehearse the rest of the day. I dissolved into tears. At that point, I realized this person now, I'm worried about her mortality. She just couldn't stop it yet. She wasn't ready.
At age 25 in 1984, Mckenzie was rolling up spare change to buy food and driving a car that had no reverse gear. It seemed an appropriate metaphor for her career.
This time, she appeared to most people in Hollywood to be gone for good. I mean, she was written off. There was maybe a second act for her, but after the second act, there was never going to be a third act. And that's how people in Hollywood thought about her.
Mckenzie Phillips only had 2 guest spots in 1985 and 1986, and then would have no more acting offers for the next 8 years. Mckenzie Phillips, the former child star, was 27 and an uninsurable outcast in Hollywood. In 1986, she fled to a town near Lake George, New York. Her father had settled there with his wife and their young daughter, Bijou, in an atmosphere that was a painful rerun of Mckenzie's childhood.
I would see lines on the table and like lots of bottles of alcohol and like, you know, needles here and there. And I was a little bit afraid of her, I think, just because of like her drug abuse was like so serious that
That's
even
her
at that
half
age, I was
sister
like
speaking.
worried for her death. So I think I sort of felt like I don't want to get too close to this person that I'm probably not going to have for very much longer.
Mckenzie was living with the guitarist in her father's band, Shane Fontaine, and she was more heavily addicted than ever.
It was painful and dirty and you know, I suppose you get to a place where you keep thinking you hit bottom and then you keep going lower, you know, and then you find out that, you know, there's a new bottom.
It seemed bottom was finally here. Mckenzie was shooting cocaine daily, and she was pregnant. In the last months of her pregnancy, Mckenzie's father checked her into another rehab clinic.
They were preparing me for all kinds of devastation. And out came this beautiful, just light pouring from his eyes, this incredible child.
But even the birth of a son, Shane Jr., on February 3rd, 1987, could not show Mckenzie the light about her own addictions. She continued to shoot cocaine and drink for the next 5 years. Mckenzie struggled to take care of her young son, but the real parenting was done by Shane's father, who was also busy taking care of her. It didn't help that Mckenzie still toured with the retooled Mamas and Papas Act, staying close to fellow drug users and pushing others away.
No, she hid it from me. She hid it from a lot of people. And the personality was just not who I wanted to be around or have anything to do with. It was all lies at that point. That's how I would say it was all lies.
But Mckenzie deeply loved her son and knew she was failing him. Something had to change. Finally, in January of 1992, it did.
It wasn't working anymore. It wasn't giving me what it used to give me. You know, I would get high and the pain would still be there. The emotional pain of being. I knew that I was going to lose my son. I was going to die. There was nothing better coming. Nothing better coming. All I could see was more of the same.
She checked into the Alina Lodge, a rehab center in New Jersey, where she remained for 9 months. She was 32 years old and finally facing her last 20 years of addiction. The strict clinic gave specific directions, such as listening before speaking. Finally, there were external rules that she would adopt into self-discipline.
She was learning to follow the rules. The first time, I mean, and this follow the rules. I mean, there'd been no rules ever before.
Mckenzie was now clean physically, but she still had to reconstruct herself as a human being. Though Mckenzie and Shane's father had eventually made their relationship legal, the strain of the years of chaos proved too much, and they split up, sharing custody of their son. Mckenzie had no money left from her acting days, but acting was still one of her only job skills. she and her son moved back to Los Angeles for one last try and bravely started making calls to everyone in Hollywood who had known her when.
What had to be an extraordinary, humbling experience for her over and over again was walking into an office where an agent and or manager forced that person, called every day to get Mckenzie back in there, and they don't want to see her. They're so not interested. Okay, all right, fine, I'll see her. And then she comes in, and you know what? I mean, the subtext, the bubble on the side of their head while Mckenzie's in the room is, I still don't give a damn about this girl. I'm sure she's just going to be addicted again or cause a problem. I'm so not hiring her. I'll do this to get the agent off my back, but what a waste of my time.
In 1994, the hard work and humility would finally pay off, and Mckenzie would begin to rebuild her old self-esteem and her career. Mckenzie Phillips was 35 in 1994 and back on track. She had beaten the demons that destroyed her career and was drug-free and sober at last. But she was still bedeviled by her own reputation. She set out to make it right.
She called every person that she had hurt or alienated or offended or caused them financial problems, and she apologized to every one of them. And she said, you don't have to hire me, but I'm telling you I'm sorry for what I did to you, and I'm back. And that sort of act of contrition opened the doors for her in a way that I don't think she even realized.
After an 8-year hiatus from acting, her first big role came on Beverly Hills 90210 in the most ironic of roles, a drug counselor. More TV guest roles dribbled in, but in 1996, she took a role that proved something to herself, singing and dancing as Rizzo in a touring production of Grease.
It showed that she could be consistent and could be there every day and was there, and she loved it. She did need to prove to the world, to the producers, to all the people out there that said, oh no, she's just a druggie, that she wasn't, that she was serious, that she had finally grown up, in public or not, but she grew up for herself this time.
She humbled herself in front of Hollywood, and you know, Hollywood is just loves a champ.
So she definitely, as you heard, made amends, right? She made amends. She called everybody. She apologized to everybody for everything she ever did to everybody. You want to call that making amends? Well, making amends is a struggle, but that's one of the first steps to recovery. Making amends, y'all, that's one of the hardest steps in recovery and in life, actually. It's hard even in just life to apologize. And it means facing the people we have hurt and even the people we feel we have hurt. It's not about excuses. And she didn't make no excuses about it. She didn't make any bones about it. She got busy and she did it. It's about truth. Mckenzie Phillips had to take amends for herself. She had to take a moral inventory. And she did that to people she hurt during her addiction and even to the memory of her mom and her dad, even as complicated as it was, even as hard as it was, no matter what. And sometimes that means apologizing directly. Sometimes it means changing your actions, because actions do speak louder than words. And sometimes it means just forgiving ourselves, because we can't always go back for every broken piece that we did or everything that we've done. But it's a start. It's a start. And if you got someone in your life that you need to make amends to, don't wait for it. Don't wait for someday. Don't wait for tomorrow. Write the letter, make the call, change the behavior, make the change. Even if that person don't accept it, that's okay. Then you have freed yourself from carrying that weight and that burden. And that's what she did, and that's what she had to do for her healing. And if you're the one who's been hurt, sometimes making amends of letting go of that bitterness is not for them, but I've spoke it plenty of times here. It's for you. It's for your peace of mind. And again, that's what Mckenzie did. And she spoke her truth. She found her peace. She forgave. And even when the world did not believe her, even when the world did not stand with her, making amends is hard, but so is carrying all of those chains. Heavy chains, dragging all of those every day, day in and day out. That will drag you down. It keeps you stuck. Don't stay stuck.
They love a Rocky story. They love a comeback. But this was a real comeback.
The personal comeback was in keeping with Mckenzie's character, passionate and public. She joined the national fight against drug addiction and was asked to tell her story on Capitol Hill.
Since getting sober, I have gone from being an unemployable person to working all the time. I have gone from being an irresponsible and unavailable mother to being an active and present and loving parent for my 11-year-old son.
Mckenzie's professional validation came when she auditioned for another television series of her own in 1999.
You watch all of these different people come in and they try their hardest, and then someone comes in and owns it. And everybody in the room felt the same exact way when she walked in that room.
Mckenzie scored the role of a singing and touring rock star, a widowed mother whose kids have a penchant for the paranormal on So Weird, another hit.
I can't explain what you saw, but I never doubted that you saw it.
The Disney Channel series has been described as The Partridge Family meets The X-Files. The storyline is as surreal as it is familiar.
My character, Molly, I get to be a strong woman on my own raising my children, which is what I do. I am a strong woman raising my son.
But playing at being a parent and being a parent are two different things, as Mckenzie Phillips knew very well.
Can I play a solo?
Yeah. Play whatever you want.
The raggedy child of rock and roll royalty would not let that happen in her family ever again. Now, she kept her distance from her troubled father.
She kind of had to overcome her family. And she finally did. It took her a long time, but she had to find in her own life and in her own heart something that was worth living for.
In the new life of Mckenzie Phillips, that was her son Shane, and he was worth it.
She's an adult. She's baking a cake for her son's birthday today. I mean, she's an adult woman, and, you know, she has structure in her life, and she has safety and guidance in her life. That
again, that right there is her half
wasn't
sister.
given. She wasn't given as a child.
I will always consider her a hero, knowing where she was and where she had to come from to get to where she is now. She's as soulful and deep and substantial and wise as anybody I have ever known. To be with her now is such a joy.
I look at her and I say, you are a miracle to me. Not only that you're here, but that we're speaking here at a pizza place, you with your kid, me with mine, all grown up, and we're here as a family, like regular people, ordinary people. A teenager.
So that, let me get that off of there. I really, hold on. I really like watching that and stuff. You're right, Lady Q. One person doesn't define the other, and that's a fact. That's a fact. But I like what she did. I like that she took accountability. And yes, she is, Millie. She's very blessed to have survived this. I got one more I want to listen to if y'all don't mind hanging. Hold on just a minute. I could listen about her all day, to be honest.
Was born on November 10, 1959, in Alexandria, Virginia. Her life was already marked by contradictions she could not yet understand. She was the daughter of two very different people. Her father, John Phillips, a rising figure in music whose ambition would make him a counterculture icon, and her mother, Susan Adams, who sought normalcy even as her marriage to John unraveled. Mckenzie's life would always straddle two worlds: the quiet suburban spaces, where her mother tried to provide routine, and the glamorous, chaotic, drug-fueled world of her father, whose band, the Mamas and the Papas, would soon become a soundtrack of a generation. These conflicting realities gave Mckenzie's early life a peculiar rhythm. She could spend 1 week surrounded by books and domestic routines with her mother. Then the next swept up in a Hollywood-style party where drugs, alcohol, and famous faces filled the air. From the very beginning, she learned to adapt to whichever world she was in, a skill that would serve her survival but also blur her understanding of stability. John Phillips, the genius and the chaos. To understand Mckenzie's childhood, one must understand John Phillips, the larger-than-life figure who loomed over her earliest memories. Born in 1935, John grew up far from the glitz of Hollywood. He attended the U.S. Naval Academy before abandoning military life for music. Tall, charismatic, and ambitious, John dreamed not just of being a musician but of being a star, a dream he chased relentlessly. By the early 1960s, he formed a folk trio called the Journeymen, but success was limited. His real breakthrough came when he joined forces with Michelle Phillips, Denny Doherty, and Cass Elliot to create the Mamas and the Papas. Their lush harmonies and songs like California Dream and Monday, Monday, and Dedicated to the One I Love captured the restless, yearning spirit of the 1960s. But John's musical genius came with demons. He was controlling in the studio, obsessed with perfection, but reckless in his personal life. He indulged in drugs early and often, and his relationships were volatile. By the time Mckenzie was old enough to recognize her father as different from other dads, he was already living the life of a rock star, adored by fans, courted by celebrities, and enslaved to his own addictions. For Mckenzie, this meant her father could be both magical and terrifying. When sober, he was charming, affectionate, and creative, pulling her into his world of music and imagination. When high or absent, he was distant, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. Her mother's world, Susan Adams, while John embodied chaos. Susan Adams, Mckenzie's mother, represented something else: attempts at order. Susan married John before fame claimed him, and she had hopes of building a family life, but John's ambitions and his affairs tore their marriage apart. After the divorce, Mckenzie split time between her parents. Susan's home offered her moments of normal childhood routines, meals at the table, bedtime hours, and attempts at discipline. Yet Susan could not compete with the magnetic pull of John's glamorous lifestyle. To a young Mckenzie, her father's world seemed more exciting, even if it was dangerous. Still, Susan's influence mattered. It gave Mckenzie glimpses of what a structured life might look like, though those glimpses were often fleeting. As Mckenzie would later reflect, she was a child of two different worlds, and her loyalties, as well as her traumas, came largely from the side of her father. Growing up in Hollywood's orbit by the late 1960s, John Phillips was at the peak of his fame, and Mckenzie grew up surrounded by the glitter of celebrity. To her, it was normal to have musicians, actors, and cultural icons milling about her home. She would see people who were heroes to millions, but to her, they were just her father's friends. But this glamorous world came at a price. Parties were constant, and drug use was everywhere. Cocaine, marijuana, and LSD were not hidden away but openly consumed. Children in these environments often saw things far beyond their years, and Mckenzie was no exception. Instead of bedtime stories, she sometimes fell asleep to the sound of raucous laughter and clinking glasses. Instead of playground lessons about sharing and fairness, she learned how to navigate a room full of intoxicated adults. Instead of being shielded from adult behavior, she was immersed in it. This environment shaped Mckenzie in profound ways. On one hand, it gave her confidence. She was unafraid of attention, unafraid to be in a room full of adults, unafraid of performance. On the other hand, it normalized chaos. For Mckenzie, disorder was order, addiction was normal, fame was reality, a lure of her father despite his flaws. John Phillips held an irresistible.
See, to her, everything was normal. That's what she lived by, in my opinion. Everything was normal. What her father did, and then all that. I mean, she knew it was wrong when it got in incest and all that, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about she was surrounded by the drugs, the rock and roll, the music. Even, Michelle Phillips said she saw, the coke laying around and all that stuff. Mckenzie, even the half sister, I mean, it was the same thing over and over again. It was endless, So, yeah, that part.
Irresistible place in Mackenzie's heart. She adored him. He had the charm of a man who could command a room with a single glance. He encouraged her curiosity, shared stories of his adventures, and introduced her to the power of music. But his love came inconsistently. There were days when John was affectionate, playful, even gentle. Then there were days when drugs, affairs, and ego pulled him far away. Mckenzie often felt torn between idolizing him and resenting his absence. This push and pull would define her childhood psychology. She craved his approval, even when his behavior frightened or disappointed her. Like many children of famous but troubled parents, she learned to adapt, to please, and to forgive too easily. The counterculture and its cost to fully grasp Mackenzie's early environment. One must look at the broader 1960s and 1970s counterculture. It was a time of rebellion against authority, of questioning traditions, of celebrating freedom, often without boundaries. John Phillips and his band were central figures in that cultural revolution. Their music wasn't just entertainment, it was an anthem for change. But the same movement that gave the world freedom also unleashed excess. Drugs were embraced as mind-expanding tools, free love blurred the boundaries of relationships, and rebellion often turned into self-destruction. For Mckenzie, growing up in this context meant that destructive behaviors weren't just permitted, they were celebrated. Adults around her spoke of breaking rules as though it was enlightenment. To a child, this was confusing. If the grown-ups said drugs were fine, why wouldn't she believe them? If free love meant ignoring boundaries, why wouldn't she think that was normal? This cultural backdrop set the stage for Mackenzie's struggles with addiction and abuse later in life. What should have been shocking to her was instead normalized from an early age. Childhood without innocence. Psychologists often speak of childhood as a time to build resilience, learn boundaries, and feel safe. For Mckenzie, childhood was more about survival. She learned to read people's moods, a skill common among children of addicts. She could sense when her father was high, when guests were drunk, when a room was about to turn volatile. She learned to stay quiet at times too, charm at others, to adapt constantly. This forced maturity robbed her of innocence. While other children her age were worrying about school tests or favorite TV shows, Mckenzie was already learning adult lessons: how to navigate instability, how to suppress fear, and how to pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. Early sparks of talent. Despite the chaos, Mckenzie had something special, a spark of charisma. People noticed it. She had her father's magnetism but her own form of expression. Instead of channeling it through music, she leaned toward acting. At the age of 12, she auditioned for a role in George Lucas's film American Graffiti 1973. To her delight, she won the part of Carol Morrison, a spunky girl who spends a wild night riding along with an older teen. For Mckenzie, this was transformative. Suddenly, she wasn't just John Phillips' daughter, she was Mckenzie Phillips' actress. She had a career, an identity, and a place in Hollywood. But her leap into acting also meant her childhood.
See, that's good, Lady Q, because, a lot of that was through her addiction and stuff like that. I'm glad you didn't have to contend with all that. I really am. It's sad, it's sad. And I encourage anybody who has a problem, or even if you don't think have a problem and you're in, that's what they call denial. But, to seek help, or break the chains. And I'm just so glad she was able to do that. And now she's out there helping many and many of people. I really do.
was effectively over. Instead of easing into adolescence, she was thrust into the adult world of film sets, directors, and public attention. The child who became an adult too soon. Looking back, it is clear that Mckenzie Phillips' early life was less about being a child and more about learning. To survive as a small adult, she was surrounded by fame but deprived of stability, adored by fans of her father but often overlooked by him personally. Her entry into acting would bring her recognition and success, but it would also amplify the pressures she already faced. She was growing up fast, too fast, in a world that didn't forgive mistakes, and Mckenzie, like her father, would make many. When most 13-year-olds are worried about school dances, math homework, and cliques in the cafeteria, Mckenzie Phillips was stepping onto a Hollywood set that would define the trajectory of her career. She was barely a teenager when she entered the film industry, but already her life had been shaped by celebrity, instability, and a sense that she needed to grow up faster than everyone else. Her breakout role in George Lucas's 1973 cult classic, American Graffiti, gave her instant recognition, but it was her casting in the CBS sitcom One Day at a Time 1975 that cemented her as a household name. Suddenly, Mckenzie Phillips wasn't just John Phillips' daughter or the girl who grew up at rock and roll parties. She was a star in her own right. But fame doesn't erase personal struggles. In Mckenzie's case, it amplified them. As her face appeared on TV screens across America, her life behind the scenes was unraveling in ways that few could see. American Graffiti,
Girl,
the first
I think
break
you'd
in
be good at it.
1973.
I
George
do.
Lucas was still a rising filmmaker when he
That's
began work on
awesome.
American Graffiti, a nostalgic coming-of-age story about teenagers cruising the streets of Modesto, California in the early 1960s. Mckenzie, just 12 years old, auditioned for a role with little experience but plenty of natural charisma. She landed the part of Carol Morrison, the sharp-tongued preteen who spends the night riding around town with an older boy. Played by Paul Le Mat. Carol wasn't a lead, but her scenes were memorable, funny, precocious, and filled with a kind of presence that suggested Mckenzie was destined for more. When American Graffiti hit theaters, it was a surprise success. The film was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and went on to become one of the most profitable movies of its era. For Mckenzie, it was a launchpad. She wasn't just John Phillips' kid anymore. She was Mckenzie Phillips, the young actress with a breakout role in a film that everyone was talking about. But with success came attention, and with attention came pressure.
And see, I think that's a lot what she wanted to. She tried to break away from her father. She wanted to be her own person. And then when she started getting the attention and the recognition, but then she was getting the bad, she was getting all the bad things. And then it was kind of too late because she was already caught up in all the drugs and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, and we'll go back and watch all that. Lady Q, I wish you would come up here and you don't have to show your face. I wish you would come up here and tell us your experience with Mckenzie. And I just think that would be awesome. But that's up to you. No pressure. No pressure. Just whatever.
Mckenzie was still just a child, but Hollywood rarely cared about to age when there was money to be made. She was thrust into the spotlight, treated as both a child and an adult, depending on what the industry needed from her at the time. The road to television stardom after American Graffiti, Mckenzie's star, was rising. Hollywood loves young talent, and she fit the bill perfectly. Charismatic, witty, and photogenic. She was offered roles in TV and film, but her biggest opportunity came when producer Norman Lear was casting a new sitcom about a divorced mother, raising 2 daughters. The show, One Day at a Time, premiered on CBS in December 1975. Mckenzie was cast as Julie Cooper, the rebellious teenage daughter of Bonnie Franklin's character Anne Romano. The younger sister Barbara was played by Valerie Bertinelli. The show was groundbreaking for its time. It tackled real issues, divorce, single parenthood, gender roles, and the struggles of adolescence in a way that felt more authentic than many sitcoms of the 1970s. Audiences quickly connected with the characters, especially the dynamic between the mother and her 2 daughters. For Mckenzie, this was both a blessing and a curse. The show gave her fame, financial stability, and a chance to showcase her acting skills to a national audience. But it also came with the relentless pressure of being a teenage star on one of the most watched shows in America. Life on the Seton set. Mckenzie was often described as vibrant, funny, and talented. She brought life to Julie, making her more than just a stereotype of a rebellious teen. Viewers saw depth, vulnerability, and humor traits that came naturally to Mckenzie but also reflected her own struggles with identity. Her co-stars became like a second family. Bonnie Franklin, playing her mother, often took on a maternal role in real life, offering guidance and support. Valerie Bertinelli, who played her sister, became both a colleague and a close friend. But even as Mckenzie was thriving professionally, her personal life was beginning to unravel. The pressures of fame collided with the instability she had already inherited from her childhood, and the cracks began to show. Fame meets fragility by the time One Day at a Time was in full swing. Mckenzie was in her mid-teens. To the outside, the world, she seemed to have it all: a successful career, money, fame, and the adoration of fans. But behind the scenes, she was struggling with something far more dangerous. Hollywood, in the 1970s, was a place where drugs were rampant. Cocaine was glamorized, marijuana was common, and heroin lingered in the background. For someone like Mckenzie, who had grown up surrounded by substance abuse in her father's home, drugs were less of a taboo and more of an inevitability. Began experimenting in her teens, and by the time she was 18, her drug use had escalated. Too many adults around her, it didn't seem alarming, it was part of the culture. But for Mckenzie, it was the start of a decades-long battle with addiction. A dual life: being a young actress meant living in two worlds. By day, Mckenzie was on set, portraying Julie Cooper, the relatable teenager millions of Americans tuned in to watch. By night, she was experimenting with drugs, partying, and slipping into habits that would become harder and harder to hide. This dual life created tension. On the one hand, she was a role model for young viewers. On the other, she was living a lifestyle that mirrored the very struggles her show often warned against. It wasn't long before the effects began to spill over into her professional life. Producers noticed when she came to work tired or late. Her energy and focus wavered. While she still delivered strong performances, those who worked with her sensed that something was wrong. Cracks in the career. By the late 1970s, Mckenzie's drug use was no longer just a private struggle. It was becoming a professional problem. In 1977, she was arrested for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. While the charges didn't derail her career immediately, they signaled the beginning of a troubled pattern. Producers of One Day at a Time grew increasingly concerned. Norman Lear and others who had supported her from the beginning now had to make difficult decisions. Mckenzie's behavior was unpredictable, and while they cared for her, the pressures of running a successful show couldn't be ignored. By 1980, Mckenzie was fired from the show due to her drug problems. It was a devastating blow. At just 20 years old, she had already reached incredible heights, and now she was watching it all slip away. Relationships and rebellion. During this period, Mckenzie's personal relationships mirrored the chaos of her professional life. She was linked romantically to various figures in the entertainment industry, often older men who were part of the same hard-partying circles. Her family relationships were equally complicated. John Phillips, though proud of her acting success, was also deep in his own struggles with drugs. Instead of being a source of stability, he often enabled her behavior. In some ways, Mckenzie's drug use became a shared bond between father and daughter, a tragic cycle of addiction passed from one generation to the next. Her mother, Susan Adams, tried to be a stabilizing force, but by then, Mckenzie was already too entrenched in the Hollywood lifestyle. Rebellion, drugs, and fame defined her late teens and early 20s. A career interrupted. Being fired from One Day at a Time didn't end Mckenzie's acting career, but it marked a turning point. She attempted to revive her career with other roles, including guest appearances on shows like The Love Boat and films like So Little Time, 1982. But her reputation had been damaged. Hollywood is often unforgiving,
I
especially
remember when she
toward
was on
women,
The Love
and
Boat.
producers were hesitant to hire someone perceived as unreliable. Mckenzie's talent was undeniable, but her drug use overshadowed her skills. By the mid-1980s, she was struggling to find steady work. Her once promising career was on hold, and she was battling the demons of addiction more fiercely than ever. Public struggles. And like many who suffer from addiction privately, Mckenzie's struggles played out in public. Tabloids followed her arrests, and scandals, often portraying her as another fallen child star. This kind of attention only deepened her shame and made recovery more difficult. Still, there were moments of hope. In the mid-1980s, Mckenzie entered rehab for the first time. She made attempts at sobriety and
See, and that's another thing. A lot of people have shame, and that keeps them from their sobriety. You should never have shame. Don't have shame. If you need help, there is help out there 24/7. Go to a meeting, get you a big book. You can do it at home. Read the big book. Do all the things yourself. And there is help out there if you need it. There are all kinds of helplines, help numbers, people you can talk to 24/7 that is private. But you can't be ashamed. No, you're fine, Lady Q. You're fine. But yeah, there's a lot of things you should not be ashamed about, because that will help somebody else, in my opinion. And if you're strong enough that you can talk about it, no matter what it is, that will also help you. But it can help somebody else, and it may even save a life, in my opinion.
For brief periods, she found success, but relapse was frequent, and the cycle repeated itself. The weight of legacy. One of the most profound challenges for Mckenzie during this period was the weight of her legacy. Being the daughter of John Phillips came with expectations and baggage. On one hand, she had inherited his charisma and artistic spirit. On the other, she had inherited his demons, fame, drugs, and instability. Seemed almost like a family curse. Mckenzie struggled not only with her own choices but also with the shadow of her father's life. Breaking free from that shadow would become one of the central struggles of her adult years. By the late 1970s, Mckenzie Phillips had achieved what millions of teenagers only dreamed of. She was not just another actress trying to make it in Hollywood. She was a television star, a household name, and one of the brightest young talents in America. With her natural charisma, tomboyish charm, and ability to make audiences both laugh and feel deeply, she became the heart of the hit sitcom One Day at a Time. But while the outside world saw a radiant young star with the world at her feet, Mckenzie's private life was crumbling. Behind the studio lights, beneath the applause, she was spiraling into a dangerous addiction that would threaten to undo everything she had built. Her story during this period is one of staggering contradictions: professional triumph intertwined with personal tragedy, fame clashing with fragility, and a young woman fighting to keep control of her life in an industry that offered little stability. This was the Mckenzie Phillips the public never saw, the one who was at once adored, exploited, and abandoned. The peak of One Day at a Time. When One Day at a Time premiered in 1975, television was going through a cultural shift. The sitcom, created by Norman Lear, was designed to reflect the changing dynamics of American families. It told the story of Anne Romano, a divorced mother raising two teenage daughters on her own. It was relatable, funny, and groundbreaking.
I feel she
Its
was
time.
also
Mckenzie played
exploited.
Julie Cooper, the rebellious, outspoken daughter. From the very beginning, Julie became a fan favorite. Mckenzie brought a raw authenticity to the role, drawing from her own complicated experiences as the daughter of divorced parents. Audiences loved her quick wit, her expressive
Yeah, I
face,
mean,
and
whatever
her
you
ability
want,
to
Lady
balance
Q,
humor
that's
with
fine.
heartfelt moments. The chemistry between
I just was
Mckenzie, Bonnie Franklin Ann, and Valerie Bertinelli
anything
Barbara,
that makes you feel
Julie's younger
comfortable,
sister,
honey. I
was
was just
electric.
going to let you
Week after week, millions tuned in to
tell
watch
your
this unconventional
whatever you
family
know.
navigate the
I just
challenges
thought
of
it'd be
life with
interesting, but
humor and
honey, no
resilience.
pressure. Whatever you
Mckenzie,
want to
just
do
a
at any
teenager,
time.
had
I
officially
love you. I'm
become
not
America's
with you.
daughter. But as the ratings soared, so too did the pressures of stardom. Pressures behind the scenes. Being a teen star is never easy. And for Mckenzie, the experience was especially grueling. She was working long hours on set while simultaneously trying to navigate the confusing years of adolescence. Hollywood was not kind to young women, especially in the 1970s. Appearance mattered almost as much as talent, and executives were never shy about commenting on an actress's weight, looks, or behavior. Mckenzie often felt scrutinized. While Valerie Bertinelli was portrayed as the sweet girl-next-door character, Mckenzie's Julie was positioned as the rebellious one. That meant Mckenzie herself became associated with that image, both on and off set. The line between character and reality blurred, and she began to internalize the pressures of living up to or living down to that role off camera. Mckenzie felt increasingly isolated. She was still very young, surrounded by adults, and yet treated as if she were already one of them. While she had friends her own age, the majority of her time was spent in the adult-riven world of Hollywood, where parties, drugs, and alcohol were not only accessible but normalized. The seeds of her struggles had already been planted in her childhood, but now, with money, fame, and freedom, those seeds began to take root. The descent into addiction. By the time she was 18 years old, Mckenzie was no stranger to drugs. Growing up in her father's world, she had seen them all her life, but as her own fame grew, her use escalated. Cocaine and heroin became part of her daily routine. For Mckenzie, drugs were both an escape and a trap. They offered relief from the constant pressure of being in the public eye, from the unresolved wounds of her childhood, and from the stress of living up to the demands of her career. But they also consumed her life, pulling her deeper into dependency and eroding her ability to function. Her drug use quickly became noticeable on set. Castmates recalled times when Mckenzie appeared disoriented, exhausted, or unable to deliver her lines. Producers and directors grew concerned, but in Hollywood, where substance abuse was rampant, it was easier to ignore the problem until it could no longer be ignored. The turning point, fired from the show by 1980, Mckenzie's addiction. It had spiraled out of control. She was missing rehearsals, showing up late, and sometimes not showing up at all. The producers of One Day at a Time reached their breaking point in what became one of the most infamous moments of her career. Mckenzie Phillips was fired from the show that had made her a star. At just 20 years old, she lost the role that had defined her, not because of lack of talent but because her addiction had become impossible to hide. The firing devastated her. For Mckenzie, one day at a time was more than just a job. It was a family, a place where she felt connected and valued. Losing that was like losing a lifeline. But instead of pulling back from drugs, the loss only drove her further into the spiral. Attempting a comeback in the early 1980s, there were attempts to bring Mckenzie back. Producers gave her chances to return to the show after she sought treatment. For her addiction, she entered rehab, made promises to get clean, and for a time things seemed hopeful. Audiences welcomed her back, rooting for both Mckenzie and Julie. But addiction is rarely linear. Relapse followed relapse. Each time she returned to the set, there were hopes that this time would be different, but the cycle continued. By the mid-1980s, Mckenzie's career was no longer defined by her talent alone but by her struggles. She became a symbol of the darker side of child stardom, a cautionary tale of what fame could do to the young and vulnerable. Strained relationships. Her addiction didn't only cost her professionally, it also took a toll on her personal relationships with her father, John Phillips. The relationship was complicated. On one hand, he had introduced her to the world of music, art, and creativity. On the other, he had also exposed her to the destructive lifestyle that had fueled her addiction. At times, they used drugs together, blurring the line between parent and peer in deeply damaging ways. Her relationship with her mother, Susan Adams, was strained as well. Susan wanted stability for Mckenzie, but the chaos of Hollywood and the grip of addiction made that nearly impossible. Even with her castmates from One Day at a Time, bonds were tested. While Valerie Bertinelli and Bonnie Franklin cared deeply for her, her behavior made it difficult to maintain close relationships. The people who loved her most often found themselves pushed away. The tabloid years. As Mackenzie's addiction worsened, the tabloids took notice. In an era before social media, celebrity magazines and gossip columns were relentless in covering her every misstep. Headlines about her drug use, arrests, and rehab stints became common. This kind of exposure only deepened her struggles. Instead of being seen as a talented actress fighting a private battle, she...
And sometimes I want to point out, you know, especially when you're in addiction, but at any time you can, but especially when you're in addiction, you always seem to hurt the people that you love the most, that you're closest to, and that you love the most. You can say some of the most hurtful, horrible things, but that's part of it. And I think that's because you know they will always be there unconditionally for you. But in her case, I do feel like she was exploited. I do feel like people used her for their benefit. And I just can't believe she really overcome all of this. I am so proud of her. And I'm glad that she got to break that chain, got to, you know, finally get clean and finally put purpose, you know, and go out and counsel to people. And she does speeches and write books and things like that now. I just think that's so important and so healing on this journey. That's just my opinion. And again, I can't say it enough. There is help out there for anybody who needs help. You're not alone. You're not alone.
She became a public spectacle, a story of scandal and downfall. For a young woman already battling shame and self-doubt, the constant negative attention was crushing the music connection. As her acting career faltered, Mckenzie never lost her connection to music. In the 1980s, she performed with her father and his band, the New Mamas and the Papas, alongside her half-sister Chynna Phillips. Music was a way to reconnect with her roots, to find purpose and identity outside of acting. But even in music, addiction followed her. Touring with the band often meant being immersed in the same environments that had fueled her drug use for years. The stage offered moments of joy and connection, but backstage, the struggles remained. Arrests and rock bottom. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Mackenzie's life was defined by cycles of recovery and relapse. She faced multiple arrests related to drugs, including possession charges that made national headlines. Each arrest brought more shame, more public scrutiny, and more distance between the life she wanted and the reality she lived. Rock bottom is different for everyone, but for Mckenzie it seemed to come in waves. There were times when she lost everything: work, relationships, stability, only to try again, to get clean, to rebuild. But the grip of addiction was unrelenting. glimpses of resilience despite everything. Mckenzie was not without resilience. Even in her darkest moments, she had an inner strength that allowed her to keep trying, to keep reaching for recovery. Friends and family often spoke of her warmth, her humor, and her ability to connect with others despite her struggles. In interviews years later, Mckenzie would reflect on this period with brutal honesty. She admitted her failures, her mistakes, and her pain, but she also acknowledged that survival itself was an achievement. By 2008, Mckenzie Phillips had been living for decades in a cycle of fame, relapse, and attempted comebacks. The little girl born into music royalty had experienced nearly every extreme early stardom: substance abuse, scandal, public confessions, and repeated attempts at sobriety. But the 2008 drug arrest at Los Angeles International Airport marked a turning point. When police officers found heroin and cocaine in her possession, it could have easily been the end of her public story. A former child star lost forever to her addictions. Instead, it became a strange kind of rebirth. For the first time, Mckenzie allowed herself to face addiction head-on, not just as something she was trapped in, but as something she could fight against, not only for herself but for others. This phase of her life is less about scandal and more about rebuilding trust, rebuilding self-worth, and rebuilding a career that no longer revolved around fame but around purpose. Chapter 1: The Arrest That Changed Everything. On August 27, 2008, Mckenzie Phillips was arrested at LAX while attempting to board a plane. Authorities discovered heroin and cocaine hidden in her belongings. For someone with her history, it looked like the final nail in the coffin of a once promising Hollywood career. But oddly enough, this arrest didn't sink her. It gave her clarity. Facing prison time, Mckenzie entered another round of treatment. Unlike before, she didn't treat it as just another stint of rehab. She approached it as survival, as if her very life depended on it, because it did by her own later admission. This was the moment when she realized, either I get clean, or I die. Instead of fading into obscurity, Mckenzie slowly began to emerge as a voice of survival. Chapter 2: Writing the Truth. In 2009, Mckenzie released her memoir, High on Arrival. The book was explosive, not just for its unflinching honesty about her struggles with drugs, but also for the shocking revelations about her relationship with her father, John Phillips. Mckenzie revealed that she and her father had engaged in a long-term incestuous relationship that began when she was 19 and continued for years. She described it not as a romantic relationship, but as something deeply confusing, manipulative, and traumatizing. The memoir rocked the entertainment world. Some people believed her instantly. Others accused her of fabricating the story for attention. Fellow musicians, family members, and even the media debated endlessly about whether John Phillips, already a troubled figure known for his drug use and controlling behavior, could have done what Mckenzie described. For Mckenzie, however, the memoir wasn't about convincing the public. It was about telling her truth. After years of hiding, numbing, and avoiding her trauma, she finally put it into words. And with those words came both liberation and backlash. Chapter 3: Facing backlash and finding support. The revelations about her father fractured her family. Some relatives publicly supported her, others distanced themselves or denied her claims. Her half-sister, Chynna Phillips of the pop trio Wilson Phillips, admitted that Mckenzie had confided in her years earlier, lending credibility to her story. Still, the family dynamic was never the same. The public reaction was equally divided. Interviews on shows like Oprah and Larry King Live brought attention, but they also brought doubt and cruel judgment. Many asked, why now? Why reveal this after her father's death? But through it all, Mckenzie stood firm. She emphasized that speaking out wasn't about revenge or publicity, it was about healing, both for herself and for others who had endured similar traumas in silence. And slowly, support grew. Survivors of abuse wrote to her, thanking her for giving voice to experiences they had long kept secret. Mental health professionals applauded her courage, recognizing how difficult it is for victims of incest to speak publicly. What began as a scandal became something deeper, a conversation starter about trauma, power, and the complicated bonds between parents and children. Chapter 4: A Shift in Purpose. After the book's release and the media storm that followed, Mckenzie began to step into a new role. Instead of trying to reignite her Hollywood career in the traditional sense, she found fulfillment in helping others. She trained to become a drug and alcohol counselor, working directly with people battling addiction. Her own decades-long struggle gave her a unique ability to connect with patients. She wasn't just another professional citing medical facts. She was living proof that even the most broken paths could lead back to life. Mckenzie began working at the Breathe Life Healing, the center in Los Angeles, where she helped guide others through recovery. In this work, she discovered something she hadn't always known in her own journey: a sense of service. This shift marked the beginning of Mckenzie's redemption arc. Hollywood fame was no longer the goal. Purpose was. Chapter 5: A Return to Acting. Though counseling became her main focus, Mckenzie never fully left acting behind. In 2017, she made a surprising and welcome return to the screen in the Netflix reboot of One Day at a Time. This time, she didn't reprise her role as Julie Cooper, the rebellious daughter from the original series. Instead, she appeared as Pam Valentine, a counselor helping others, a role that mirrored her real-life work. The casting choice was powerful. It showed audiences a Mckenzie Phillips who had transformed, who had grown from the troubled teen of the 1970s into a woman with wisdom, strength, and compassion. Her performance was subtle, grounded, and informed by lived experience. Fans welcomed her back. Critics noted the poetic justice of her return. An actress once defined by scandal now portraying a figure of guidance. Chapter 6. A voice for survivors. Beyond acting and counseling, Mckenzie began to embrace her role as a public advocate. She spoke openly about trauma, addiction, and survival, appearing at conferences, interviews, and recovery events. Her willingness to discuss difficult topics, incest, relapse, self-destruction, and redemption, made her an important voice in conversations many preferred to avoid. For survivors of abuse and those struggling with addiction, she became a beacon of resilience. Mckenzie's story showed that even when life spirals into the darkest places, there is always the possibility of rebuilding. She often emphasized that recovery is not about perfection but persistence, a lesson she had lived many times over. Chapter 7. Reflections on family and legacy. Despite her success in recovery and advocacy, Mckenzie's relationship with her family remained complicated. The revelations about John Phillips forever altered how the public remembered him. For some, he remained a musical genius. For others, his legacy was permanently tainted. Mckenzie, however, refused to let her father's actions define her entirely. She acknowledged the pain, but she also recognized that her life was more than her trauma. By sharing her story, she reclaimed power over it. Her son Shane Barracon became one of her strongest sources of pride and stability. Unlike the fractured parenting she had known, Mckenzie strove to give her son love and honesty. Their bond became proof that cycles could be broken, that even children of chaos could raise children of care. Chapter 8. Writing again. In 2017, Mckenzie released her second book, Hopeful Healing, Essays on Managing Recovery and Surviving Addiction. Unlike her first memoir, this was less about telling her personal story and more about sharing lessons learned through recovery and counseling. It became part guidebook, part reflection, a resource for those fighting the same battles she had fought. This book further cemented her role not just as a survivor but as a teacher. Mckenzie's voice carried the authority of lived experience. She wasn't preaching from a pedestal. She was walking alongside her readers, offering empathy and tools. Chapter 9. Acceptance of a complicated past. By the late 2010s and into the 2020s, Mckenzie Phillips had settled into a different rhythm of life. She was no longer chasing fame or headlines. Instead, she embraced acceptance of her past, her mistakes, and her survival. She often spoke about the idea that healing isn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it. The trauma, the addiction, the scandals, they were all part of her story. Denying them would deny who she was. Accepting them gave her peace. For Mckenzie, life became less about explaining or justifying and more about living in service, sobriety, and honesty. Chapter 10. Legacy of survival. Today, Mckenzie Phillips is recognized as more than just a former child star. She is a symbol of resilience, someone who has endured almost every kind of hardship yet still found a way to stand. Her legacy is complicated, yes, but it is also inspiring. She represents the reality that healing is messy, that recovery is never linear, and that even the most painful truths can become sources of strength. Through her counseling, her books, her acting, and her public advocacy, Mckenzie has transformed personal tragedy into collective hope. The story of Mckenzie Phillips is not one of neat resolutions. It is the story of a woman who has fallen countless times but who has also...
I think Mckenzie is a hope and an inspiration for a lot of people. I can't say that enough. I really can't. I think she took accountability. She finally got clean. And I think she is a living, walking inspiration for a lot of people and is still out there helping people. And I really, truly believe this can help a lot of people. And I hope y'all share it out because I don't know. I just feel like it can touch someone. I don't know. But she was honest. She was very honest about everything, even when the world left her, even when her family disowned her, everything. Even when she gave amends to everybody that you heard in that last video, which is part of the program. But even when she gave amends, she still stuck by the story of what happened to her, especially with her father and stuff, even though she forgave or whatever. But yeah, truth. I'm just glad she was strong enough through all of that to tell her truth.
Also gotten up again and again. Her later life is defined not by perfection but by perseverance. In helping others heal, she continues to heal herself. In speaking her truth, she gives others permission to do the same. Mckenzie Phillips' journey reminds us that survival is not about avoiding darkness but about walking through it and coming out the other side. Her story is not over. Recovery is never over, but as long as Mckenzie keeps choosing life, honesty, and healing, her legacy will remain one of redemption and resilience. By the time the 2000s arrived, Mckenzie Phillips had already lived more lives than most people could imagine. She had been a child star, a rising television actress, a fallen celebrity, an addict, a survivor, and slowly a woman working her way back to health. She had walked through both unimaginable darkness and moments of redemption. Yet in 2009, the world would come to know of a hidden chapter of her life that eclipsed every struggle she had ever revealed. That chapter was shocking, painful, and, for many, nearly impossible to comprehend. But for Mckenzie, telling the truth was not about seeking attention, it was about survival. It was about finally breaking the silence that had bound her for decades. And though the revelations nearly destroyed what little was left of her relationship with her family, they also gave her something she had never truly felt before: liberation. The road to revelation. Writing her memoir throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, Mckenzie worked hard to maintain her sobriety. She wasn't perfect, few recovering addicts are, but she committed to rebuilding her life piece by piece. Acting roles were no longer the center of her world. Instead, she began focusing on her own healing and helping others. Still, the shadows of her past loomed large. Therapy sessions and addiction recovery programs forced her to confront memories she had long tried to bury. There were things she had never spoken about publicly, not even to close friends. But the longer she carried those memories, the heavier the burden became. By the mid-2000s, Mckenzie began to seriously consider writing a memoir. Others in her position, actors, musicians, children of celebrities, had already done so. But Mackenzie's story was different. It wasn't just about Hollywood, fame, or addiction. It was about something darker, something that would horrify many and anger others. Her decision wasn't easy. She knew that writing honestly about her life meant revealing truths that would likely destroy her relationship with her father's fans, fracture her family further, and invite public scrutiny. But the alternative, silence, was no longer an option. The result was High on Arrival 2009, a memoir that chronicled not just her years of addiction and celebrity struggles, but also a revelation that stunned the world. The shocking confession in her memoir. Mckenzie Phillips revealed something she had kept secret for decades. She had been involved in a long-term incestuous relationship with her father, John Phillips. The first incident, she wrote, occurred when she was just 19 years old. The night before her wedding in 1979, her father allegedly entered her room after she had taken drugs and initiated sexual contact. Mckenzie described being in shock, not fully comprehending what was happening. From there, she claimed, the relationship continued on and off for nearly 10 years. Sometimes she considered herself a victim. Other times, she admitted, she believed she was a consenting participant, though therapists later helped her understand that there could never truly be consent in such a situation. Her words in High on Arrival were raw and unflinching. I was a victim of incest with my father. It became a consensual relationship, but it was still incest, and it was abuse. The revelation was explosive. The image of John Phillips as a 1960s musical icon shattered overnight. Fans who had grown up on California Dreamin' now struggled to reconcile their love for the music with the horror of the allegations. The media stormed the day her memoir was released. Mckenzie appeared on The Oprah Winfrey Show, where she repeated her story publicly for the first time. The interview was one of the most watched episodes of the season, drawing millions of viewers. Reactions were immediate and polarizing. Some people praised Mckenzie for her bravery, applauding her willingness to speak out about incest, a subject that was and still is deeply taboo. Survivors of sexual abuse across the country wrote to her, thanking her for giving voice to their own hidden pain. But others reacted with anger, disbelief, or dismissal. Critics accused her of fabricating the story to sell books. Some family members rejected her claims outright. Even within the Phillips family, the reaction was divided. Michelle Phillips, John's second wife and a fellow member of the Mamas and the Papas, publicly cast doubt on Mackenzie's story, suggesting her memories were the result of drug-induced confusion. Chynna Phillips, Mackenzie's half-sister and a member of the pop group Wilson Phillips, initially expressed shock but later said she believed Mackenzie's account.
And I want to say this. Listen, people want to blame her, the victim, and say, didn't believe her, but something that caught my attention was what they're saying. But here's the thing. You might not know at the time. You might be drunk, high, whatever. You might have been given a drug or whatever. But never underestimate. A woman knows when something happens to her. A woman knows her body. And a woman knows when she's been violated. So you can just take that and mark them words down.
Other siblings remained largely silent, caught between loyalty to their late father and the pain of Mackenzie's words. The media frenzy was relentless. Headlines splashed across newspapers and entertainment outlets. Talk shows debated whether Mckenzie was telling the truth. Online forums erupted with arguments
And I
between
was
those
going
who
to say
supported her
drugs or
and
no
those who dismissed
drugs.
her. For
Trust
Mckenzie,
me.
the experience was both liberating and devastating. She had finally spoken the truth, but the cost was steep. Fractured family ties, public scrutiny, and renewed personal pain. The deeper meaning, breaking the silence on incest, as painful as the media backlash was, Mackenzie's revelations opened up a broader cultural conversation. For decades, incest had been one of society's most hidden and stigmatized issues. Survivors rarely came forward, fearing disbelief, shame, or retaliation. By speaking publicly, Mckenzie gave voice to thousands of survivors who had lived in silence. Advocacy groups praised her courage, noting that her story forced the public to confront the reality that incest and familial abuse happen more often than most people want to admit. In interviews after the book's release, Mckenzie emphasized that her goal was not to destroy her father's legacy but to free herself from secrecy and shame. She repeatedly stated that she loved her father but could no longer carry the weight of what had happened. Her honesty, while controversial, also positioned her as an unlikely advocate. She became involved in discussions about sexual abuse, trauma, and recovery, lending her voice to survivors who often had none. Life after the memoir, a new chapter of advocacy in the years following the release of High on Arrival. Mckenzie transitioned into a new role, not just actress or celebrity, but advocate and counselor. She began working as a drug and alcohol rehabilitation counselor, using her decades of experience with addiction to guide others on the path to recovery. She joined the staff at Breathe Life Healing Centers in Los Angeles, where she worked directly with people battling the same demons she had faced. Her approach was unique. She didn't speak from theory, but from lived experience. Clients often felt they could trust her because she wasn't just a professional. She was someone who had been in the trenches, who had fallen to rock bottom and climbed back up. At the same time, she continued acting in smaller roles and making guest appearances on television, including a recurring part on the show Orange is the New Black in the mid-2010s. But acting was no longer her main pursuit. Helping others became her central purpose. Reflections on family and forgiveness. One of the most painful aspects of Mackenzie's later life has been her fractured family relationships. Her revelations about John Phillips created a divide that has never fully healed. Some siblings remained supportive, recognizing the importance of her truth-telling. Others distanced themselves, either unwilling or unable to reconcile her claims with their memories of their father. The Phillips family name, once synonymous with the golden harmonies of the 1960s, now carried the weight of scandal. Yet, Mckenzie herself has repeatedly expressed love for her father. Despite everything, in interviews, she has spoken of the complexity of their relationship, the way addiction distorted both of their lives, the blurred lines between love and harm, and the tragedy of a man who was both brilliant and deeply broken. Forgiveness for Mckenzie is not about excusing what happened, but about freeing herself from bitterness. She has chosen to carry her past as a truth rather than a wound that defines her. A legacy of survival. As Mckenzie Phillips entered her 60s, her story came to embody more than scandal or fame. It became a story of survival. She survived childhood in a chaotic household. She survived the pressures of Hollywood and the destruction of addiction. She survived the loss of career, reputation, and family ties. She survived the weight of secrets too heavy for anyone to bear. And in surviving, she transformed herself into something more than an actress or celebrity. She became a voice for the voiceless, a reminder that even the darkest stories can lead to light. Mckenzie Phillips' life has been anything but easy. It has been messy, tragic, complicated, and often painful, yet it has also been marked by resilience, redemption, and the courage to tell the truth, no matter the cost. Today, when people hear her name, they may remember the scandals, the arrests, or the shocking memoir, but they may also remember her as a survivor who refused to be silenced. Her journey from child star to addict to advocate reflects not only the dangers of fame but also the strength of the human spirit. Mackenzie's life is proof that healing is possible, even after decades of pain, and that telling the truth even when the world doesn't want to hear it can be the first step toward freedom. In the end, Mckenzie Phillips is not defined by her father, her fame, or her struggles. She is defined by her survival. And in that survival lies her true legacy.
Okay. So thank you. Yeah, I think she had a messy life, but here's what you should take, from this. Your past does not define your future, and it does not define who you are. Your choices, what you do and you choose today, that's what does, in my opinion. Mckenzie's story, it's a messy one. It's painful. It's shocking. It's not wrapped up with pretty little bows. It's not. But she turned her pain into a purpose. She's proof healing is possible even when your scars are deep. And let me tell you something, she had some deep scars. That's the lesson that all of us should, take away. And if you're struggling with addiction, help is out there. And if you've been through abuse, your voice matters. If you carry shame, it doesn't have to be your story forever. It doesn't have to be your story. Don't be ashamed. Don't let silence win. Talk about it. Don't let pain chain you down. Speak, heal, help someone else. That's how you break the cycle. That's how you break the cycle. Mckenzie, she may have lived through darkness, and I, there's no doubt she did, but she also shows us all the light. We can't change what happened to us, but we can change what happens through us. There's a big difference there. So if anyone listening, whether you're fighting your own demons, carrying a heavy past, or standing up for justice, just like I do with Emmanuel, Sebastian, Summer, or all the victims there, remember, when we speak, we rise by speaking, by loving, and by refusing to let silence win. I thank you all for being here. Thank you very, very much. And, I'm just glad I could bring this to you today. I'll see you in the streets. Hello, Andrea. I'll see you in the streets. YouTube streets, that is. Just smell around and find out. There ain't no telling what else we'll come up with. But I love you all. Thank you for being here. And hit that thumbs up on your way out. Bye.